How would you like to have crazy credit card limits like this $62,000 right here, or $28,000 like this one, $30,000? I can keep going. These are all my accounts that I'm logging into. These are not fake screenshots. And the purpose of this video is to show you how you can pretty much do the exact same thing. So back in 2022, I created this beautiful thing called high limit hacks. At the time, hundreds of people bought it and got some pretty good results from it. And the reason for that is because there's a formula to guarantee high limit approvals almost every single time you get a brand new credit card, line of credit, loan, etc. This guy got 10K, went from 6K to 10K, went from 3,000 to 7,000, got approved for 15,000, got approved for 26.5K, more increases, 30,000, 20,000. This is just to show that it's not just me, it's replicatable. 17.5, over 48K in increases. That's crazy. You guys get it, it works. I'm gonna break it down. Now, like I mentioned, this was filmed back in 2022, so I had to go back and rewatch the entire thing, take out information that is no longer relevant because the credit space is changing every 3 to 6 months. I went ahead and added some information that is relevant and that is important to right now. And to be honest, by the time you're finished watching this whole thing, you should know how to get 30 to 50K in credit card limits, the strategies to guarantee these type of approvals, even if you're someone who has low limits, how to get these limit increases without triggering an inquiry from the bank, a list of high limit lenders. So if you're someone who's stuck with low limits, banks that you can strategically hit to guarantee these high approvals. All of this with the goal of helping you guys get higher limits on the personal side, which then will help you get high limits on the business side. So that being said, I will have timestamps down below with all of the different sections that are in this course, because some of it is very beginner stuff, some of it is more intermediate, and some of it's more advanced. You guys can go ahead and skip to the section that benefits you the most. But that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoy it. If you have any questions, put in the comments down below or slide in my DMs. Hey, what's up guys? So welcome to High Limit Hacks. This is going to be a compact and concise mini course going over everything that you guys need to know to get some really high limits on your credit accounts. So first things first, let's talk about why are high limits important in the first place, right? A lot of you are going to get access to these funds that you've never had access to, and it's important for you to know what you should and shouldn't be doing with it. So number one, which is probably the most obvious, is that it boosts your credit score. And the reason for that is because a lot of people have low credit scores due to something called utilization. Utilization is just the amount of credit that you utilize each month, right? If I'm going to give you two examples here, right? Let's say you had a $1,000 credit card, but your monthly expenses are $500 a month. If you were to use $500 out of those 1,000, you are using 50% utilization on your credit card. If we pull up this little chart here, you've probably seen it before. Looking at utilization, if you have 50% utilization, that puts you in the very, very poor category. And the thing about utilization is that it makes about 1/3 of your entire credit score. So if you're sitting at very poor with one of the most important factors, you can expect your credit to be low. Now, take that same person, and instead of having a $1,000 limit, they have a $10,000 limit on that same credit card. And they're still using those same $500. Those same $500 on a $10,000 credit card only equal to 5% utilization. And if we go back to the chart, 5% utilization puts you right in the excellent category. I've seen many instances where people have had a credit boost or a credit jump of over 100 points just by simply bringing down their utilization. So having high limits can really, really help with that. Point number two is fundability, right? So if you're watching this video, either you have a business or you want to start a business and you want to use credit card funds to do that, right? But it's very hard to do any of that stuff with a $500,000 limit. You can't really do much with that. You need at least $10,000 to $20,000 to get something off the ground. That's the beauty of high limit cards. They give you access to funding and you can do whatever it is you need to do with those funds. And the other thing is, when you have high limits on your personal accounts, this starts to reflect on the business side as well. Even if you don't have business credit established, you can leverage your personal credit and leverage your personal high limits, take that over to the business side and also get high limit business cards. Number three is an emergency fund. And I consider this an emergency fund of an emergency fund. Everyone should have a savings account. Everyone should have money stored in case of a rainy day, in case something happens. Number four is leverage. Honestly, I could have combined this one with fundability. What I just meant by leverage is that when you have access to more, you can do more. Now, the last thing I want to mention is number five, which is borrowing over saving. And I think this one's really important because, to save $10,000, let's say $100,000. That's some big chunk of money right there. To save $100,000, depending on how much you make each year, that could take you several weeks or potentially several years. The thing about credit is you can borrow $100,000 a lot quicker than you can save it. If your credit is in good standing, your limits are high on the personal side, you can easily get access to $100,000 in funds. And that's not going to take you several months or several years. That's something that can take you just a few days or a few weeks. Also look at it in terms of time, right? Time is one of our most valuable assets. Now, I'm sure you've heard the saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago and the next best time is now, right? So if you have a business that you want to execute on right away, would you rather spend several months or several years having to save up, or would you rather borrow that money right away and get started on that venture immediately? Talk about some prerequisites. First things first, KYC, know your customer. Every bank asks for this, right? They want to know who you are, how much you make, where you live, all that stuff. So you want to go ahead and update this information. The two best ways to do this is number one, call them up. If you don't like calling them, you don't like being on hold, best thing to do is go online, go into your credit card portal, log in, go to your profile, look for your account settings, and just update the information right there. And do this on new cards that you have and old cards, right? Because we all got our credit card when we were in college, or sometime in our teens, 20s, and at the time you're only making like what, $10,000-$20,000. So you want to make sure you go in, update that information, so the banks know that you're making more money. They know that you're making more money. They're going to lend more money to you. You'd be surprised how many people go back, do this, and 3 to 6 months later, they get a limit increase without even having to request it. They just get it on their own. And also, while you're at it, update your housing and your investments, right? They don't always ask for this, but they will ask you, do you rent? Do you have a mortgage? If you have a mortgage, it looks a little bit better. And with investments, sometimes they'll ask you, do you have money set aside in a retirement account or an investment account? It's good to put yes, and it's good to include that information if you have it. That way they know that you have access to more funds, and they know you have money to pay back. They'll lend you more. With the KYC, be honest, don't overdo it. If you're making $100K a year, don't put that you're making $1 million a year, right? Even though this is all stated income, and we're going to talk about what kind of income numbers you should be putting in your applications, you still want to keep it as honest as possible. Number 2 is relationships are everything. And if you guys take anything out of this section, make sure it's this slide right here. When lenders are going to give you something, what's the first thing they check? Your credit, right? Right below credit, the next thing they check is your relationship with them. Pretty much, is this a new client or is this an existing client? If you're a new client, they don't know you. They don't know your spending pattern. They don't know how much money you have in the bank. They don't know anything about you. They just know your credit. If you're an existing client, they know your name's John. They know you have $5,000 sitting in your savings account. They know how much you spend every month. They know how much you make every month. They know more about you. So that being said, it's important for you guys to develop these relationships with banks, right? Anytime I'm going to open up a credit card, I always try and go and open at least a checking account, whether that's on the personal or on the business side, at least opening up a checking account with that bank, depositing $1,000. You don't have to do 1,000. You can go anywhere from 500. The more you put, the better, because it puts you in a different tier as a customer. Now, if you don't go with the route of depositing some funds into the account when you first open it, I recommend at least setting up reoccurring deposits from a completely different checking account or savings account into this account, right? So they can at least see some kind of money flowing into it. Even if it's just $100 a month, it makes a difference and it helps to have that set up. I'm gonna actually give you guys a recent example here. I opened an account a few months ago. I've had an account open with Navy Federal for years actually, but I've never had money in that checking or that savings account. I've just had the account sitting there. And when I went to apply for a credit card, they gave me a $500 limit. And the reason for that is because with Navy Federal, they have what's called an interbanking relationship. So they look at my credit score, but they also look, how is our relationship with Rodrigo at the time? Now, after calling in, a little back and forth arguing, I was able to get a limit increase on this card, which we're going to talk about later, how you guys can do that with Navy Federal. But the guy recommended, when I was on the phone with him, he was like, we understand that you want to get a higher limit on this account, but we need to see more activity with your personal account, with your checking account. Whether it's a monthly deposit, whether it's you spending more on your debit card, whether you put some funds in there, we need to see more activity. So what did I do? I set some reoccurring deposits. I think it was like $300 to $350 a month to go from a different checking account into my Navy Federal account. And then after 3 months, I got a limit increase on that card, and I didn't even have to request it. They just gave me the limit increase automatically. You guys would be surprised how many people I've seen with terrible credit scores get approved for $20,000 limit credit cards with Navy Federal, or just credit unions in general, because credit unions are very strong with relationships. Getting approved for cards, loans, auto loans, personal loans, lines of credit just because the relationship with that bank or with that credit union are strong. This is actually one of the reasons why I have a checking account with almost every major bank in the US, because I'm building a relationship with each of them. Now, if you're one of those people who just opened a checking account or a savings account with a bank, you don't have to wait, 2 or 3 months to apply for any of their credit products. You can do it after like 7 to 10 days. Just make sure your account is fully set up and you have some funds in the account. And once you do that, you can go ahead and apply for their credit products. But I'm telling you guys, these relationships make a big difference. As somebody who has done funding for other people, I've taken 2 completely different people with similar credit scores. One has a relationship, like a business checking account with Chase, and they get approved for a $30,000 limit credit card. The other person, they have the same credit, really good credit, but they don't have a business checking account with Chase. So they only get approved for like 10, 12, 15,000, half of what the other person got. Again, most people don't do this because it takes time. It requires extra effort and extra work. But if you go the extra mile, it's going to get you access to higher limits in the long run. And if you have local credit unions or regional banks in your area that you can go open accounts with, do that. Usually these credit unions and regional banks are very well known for giving out generous limits to their customers. I do actually want to mention one more thing, guys. I have seen a correlation between having, a lot more funds, a lot more money in your checking savings account leads to slightly higher limits. It's not necessary, but it does help. Now let's talk about utilization. Just a quick point on this one. Whenever you guys are asking for limit increases or just any card, you're applying for a card in general, one of the most important things you need to do is have utilization under 30% on all of your accounts. And the reason for that is because even when a bank gives you a limit increase and they do a soft pull on your credit, meaning they're not doing a hard credit check and not hitting you with an inquiry, when they do a soft pull, they're still running your credit and they're still checking it. And what they're checking for is to see, hey, is this person, do they have maxed out credit cards or is their utilization fine? Banks see everything from a risk perspective. So they soft pull your credit and they see, hey, this guy has 80, 90% utilization on his cards. Why are we going to give him access to more credit? He obviously is struggling to pay off the credit that he already has. Versus they soft pull your credit, they see 10%, 20% utilization. Okay, cool. This guy's, responsible. He's paying his cards in full on time each month. We'll give him access to higher credit. This is especially true with American Express. American Express is notorious for doing soft pull credit checks to see what your utilization looks like. Even if you don't apply for a credit card or even if you don't apply for a limit increase, there's rumors out there that they do this every single month, right? This is why I have all of my credit reports locked. I only unlock my credit reports if I'm going to apply for something. But if I'm not going to apply for anything, I tend to keep everything locked to prevent banks from seeing, what I'm doing with my credit. Now, when American Express does this, they actually want to see what you're doing with other banks as well, not just with them, but with other banks. They want to see, is this person maxing out cards with other banks? And there's been times where, people have maxed out a Chase credit card or Wells Fargo's credit card or Bank of America credit card, and American Express will come back and reduce the limit on one of their cards, on an American Express card, just because they see that you're maxing out cards with other banks. Again, going back to risk, if they see, oh, this person's maxing out all their cards in other banks, what is the likelihood that they're going to do that with our cards as well? We can't do that. We need to pull some of our credit back. It's happened. During COVID, this actually happened a lot, not just with American Express, but with a lot of the other banks. Maybe one of you watching this went through that, where during COVID, you saw that one of your credit cards or several of your credit cards had limit decreases. And the reason was that when the banks see that your utilization is really high, they see you as really high risk. So they have to pull some of that money back. Okay, now that we went over the prerequisites, let's get into some strategies. First things first, what income do I use? I get this question very, very often. People don't know what income they can be using in their credit card application or loan application. Now, you guys have to keep in mind, with credit cards, this is stated income. So they're going based off what you're stating. 90% of the time, 95% of the time, they're not going to ask for proof of income unless you're using very, very big numbers, which we're going to get into here. So if you're applying for personal cards, I've noticed, just based off of me being someone who does funding for people, anytime you go over 300,000 on the personal side, on personal credit cards, anytime you put over $300,000 in income, that is when they start asking for, proof of income. Now, with that being said, since this is stated income, guys, you can put what you are estimating to make for that year. If you're someone who regularly makes $50,000 a year, but you know that, this year, inflation's up, you're going to get bonuses, you're going to get a raise, maybe you're going to make $60,000 this year. then you can realistically put in your application around 60,000. Even though last year you made 50,000, you're expecting to make more this year, so put, high 50s, get into the 60s range. This works especially well if you have a side hustle. That income still is technically income, and you can put that as income that you make on your application. If you are over 21, you can use combined household income, right? So if you're a college student and you live at home with parents, let's say you make 20,000, but your parents make 100,000. Realistically, your household income is 120,000. 100 from your parents, 20 from you. So that's something you can put in the application. And it even says on the application process that you can put household income. Or if you live with a significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend, you make 50K, she makes 50K as well. That's 100K right there. You can put that in the application. Same thing with roommates, all that, right? As long as you can prove it, if they even come back and ask for it, which, like I said, 90 to 95% of the time they won't, you can put that household income on the application. I should probably mention this as well, but if you're not employed, you're a student or you're not working, don't ever put in your application that you're not employed. That's direct route to denial. Always put some kind of income in there, even if it's something that you're estimating to make. Right? You just got a new job, and for that job, you're going to be making 40K for that year. Put the 40K. That's what your salary expectation is for that year. And lastly, keep it consistent, guys. I've noticed a lot of people do this where they apply for one card and they put one number, and then a few weeks later they apply for another credit card and they put a different number. It's really good to keep those numbers consistent. Anytime I apply for anything, I write down what numbers I used because believe it or not, the banks do share this information with each other sometimes. Now, getting into business cards here, the threshold is about $1 million, right? So if you put any number over $1 million, that's where you can start expecting those income verification or proof of income to be being requested by the bank. Obviously, since it's a business, businesses tend to make more than an actual individual does. So that's why the threshold for income is a lot higher on business cards, on business credit cards. And that's why the limits are a lot higher as well. The cool thing about a brand new business, like let's say you just started a business a month ago, this is where stated income becomes really useful, right? Because you just started this business a month ago, but you're expecting your business to make $180,000, $200,000 that year. You can put that expected income as the income for the business, even if the business hasn't made any money for that year. And if they do hit you with, hey, we need some income verification, you tell them, oh, I just started this business this year, I don't have any taxes for it, and this is what we're expecting to make, if they come back and ask for proof of income. Also, when it asks you how long you've been in business, always put at least 1 year. Now, what I've noticed usually with business cards is that they'll usually give you 10% of what your stated revenue is. And this is if your credit is really good and your personal limits are really good. That's where you can expect to get that 10%. So if your business is making about $200,000 or expecting to make $200,000, then off the bat, you can expect to get a $20,000 limit on that card because 10% of $200,000 is $20K. 300K would be $30,000. 400K would be $40,000. This rule here isn't set in stone, but it's kind of like a rough estimate, right? If you want to get an idea of like about how much you think you might get approved for, you can basically use that as a reference. Another thing I should mention is every bank has a limit of how much they're going to give to a specific customer. And that limit can range anywhere from like 50 to 100,000, right? This is all depending on your credit, your income. And the reason I should mention that is because don't expect to, put that you make $700,000 on your business and expect a $70,000 credit card. You're not going to get that right off the bat. Realistically, they may give you, 30, 35, 40, 50,000 on the credit card, but not 70K. And I've already stated this before, but I'll just recap it one more time. Your personal limits will impact your business limits, right? So if you have them high on the personal side, they'll be high on the business side as well. So next we have the spend and pay strategy, or at least that's what I like to call it because it doesn't really have a name. This is probably one of the easiest ways to get a limit increase, but it does require work and it does take time. And unfortunately, a lot of people are not patient enough to wait around and do this, but it's very, very effective and it works. So the way this works is you max out your credit cards about 2 to 3 times a month, and you also pay them off in full those 2 to 3 times that you max it out. In a month, we have 4 weeks. Let's say once a week, you were to just max out that card. Use it on everything, every expense that you have for that week. Put it on that credit card, max it out. At the end of the week, pay it. The following week, do the same thing, and the following week, do the same thing. It doesn't have to be week to week to week to week. Now, the reason that works and the reason it's so effective is because banks track your spending patterns a lot. And if they see that this, you're someone who is constantly having to max out your card and pay it off each month, then obviously you're somebody who spends a lot, right? But you're also paying a lot. So if you're spending a lot and paying all that back, you're going to get a limit increase. I'm going to give you guys an example here. A few years ago, when I would manufacture spend a lot on my credit cards to get cashback points and all that stuff, and we're going to get into that in the bonus section. Manufacturer spending just means you are kind of like faking your spend. You're manufacturing your spend. You're spending more without really spending more. I would do that for about 3-4 months, and I would see my credit limits go up without me having to request it, just because the banks noticed that my spending had gone up. After those 3 months pass by, one of two things can happen. Number one, they will just give you a limit increase, and without you even requesting it, you'll just see that your limit increase on its own. Or if you do request a limit increase, there's no reason why they should deny it, right? Your card is paid in full, you don't have any late payments, and you show that you use your card a lot. If for some reason you do get denied for the limit increases after 3 or 4 months of doing this, call it in. Call in and talk to somebody and have them reconsider the limit increase, right? Just how with a credit card you can turn a denial into an approval, you can do the same thing with a limit increase request. Another strategy that people don't really know is out there is merging credit limits. A lot of the major banks are really good with this, where you can actually take limits that you have on certain cards and move it over to other cards. So, and I'll use Chase as an example because it's probably like one of the easiest banks to do this with. Let's say you have a $5,000 credit card and this is like your Chase Freedom Flex. And let's say you have a Freedom Unlimited and this card also has a $5,000 limit. You can actually request to shift the limit from one card to another. So you have to leave at least, I believe, $500. So let's say you were to move $4,500 from one card to another, right? So here we're going to subtract $4,500 and we're going to move that limit over to this card here. And this card is now going to have the $4,500, making this card $9,500. Now, the reason this works is because you're inflating your credit limits. And anytime you're applying for something, for credit cards to be specific, banks are doing what's called comparable credit. They're comparing credit limits. They want to see what are your low limits, what are your high limits, what have other banks given you. So let's say you apply for a Wells Fargo credit card and Wells Fargo sees, oh, this person has a $9,500 Chase card. Chase has trusted this customer with $9,500. Well, we can give them a limit at around that same range. If Chase is giving them such a high limit, we can also give them a high limit. But this right here of merging limits is a really nice hack to just have a high limit without necessarily getting approved for a high limit, and you're just leveraging other cards and merging things together. I'm gonna give you guys a really good example on this one. A few years ago, there was the Alliant Visa credit card, and it's a credit card that if you get approved for it, it is a guarantee that you're gonna get $15,000 on that credit card. However, in order for you to get approved for that credit card, and this was a data point directly from the bank themselves, in order to get approved for that $15,000 limit credit card, you need to already have a credit card with a limit over $10,000, right? This is a few years ago. At the time, I don't think I had a credit card over $10,000, but I did have several Chase credit cards. What I did was I merged the limits from several Chase cards into one, and that one credit card, I made sure that its limit was over $10,000. That way, when I went and applied for that Alliant Visa signature card with that credit union, I got approved. So you see, just because I didn't have a $10,000 limit credit card, I didn't let that stop me. I just had to get really creative with it. Like I said, merge some limits. When you do this, you do have to wait for all this to update with the credit bureaus, and that takes about 30 days. So this isn't right away, right? With the banks, it is right away. As soon as you shift the limit from one card to another, that'll reflect on the credit card account right away. You have to wait about 30 days for it to report for it to update with the credit bureaus. One last thing I quickly wanted to mention is you want to have accounts over 10,000. If you guys ever have gone through funding or you work with a funding company, sometimes one of the requirements, just like with that Alliant credit union, is you need to have at least 1 or 2 credit cards with a $10,000 limit. Basically, you having access to 10K plus credit cards just shows that you are a lot more responsible with much more debt. Last thing is, let's talk about high tier credit cards. For those who don't know, credit cards have tiers. They're all in different tiers. You have tiers from basically tiers 1 to 5. Now, this applies mainly with the major banks, the well-known banks. And with these guys, you want to start getting into the tier 3 and tier 4 cards. One of the best ways of knowing what tier a credit card is in is by actually seeing what version of Visa or MasterCard they're in. For example, Visa has 3 different tiers. They have Visa Traditional, Visa Signature, and Visa Infinite. And when you get a Visa Infinite credit card, that card is guaranteed to have a $10,000 credit limit. MasterCard also has 3 tiers. They have regular MasterCard, MasterCard Elite, and MasterCard World Elite. And when you get a MasterCard World Elite credit card, you can guaranteed get a $5,000 credit limit. So pulling up some Chase cards here, you can see one of the more popular cards. Everyone knows this one, the Freedom Flex. This is just a standard MasterCard. You have something like the Freedom Unlimited. This is a traditional Visa, just plain Visa. But now we move over to something like a Sapphire Preferred, right? This card now comes with an annual fee, and it starts coming with a lot more benefits than the Freedom Unlimited or the Freedom Flex does. But as you can see here, it's a Visa signature card. Now go to something like the Sapphire Reserve. This is a Visa Infinite. Now the Sapphire Reserve with Chase is probably, well, it is one of their hardest credit cards to get. But if you get it, like I said, since it has that Visa Infinite badge, you can guaranteed to get a $10,000 limit minimum on this card. Now, obviously, when you're first starting off in your credit journey, you cannot go for tier 3 and tier 4 cards right away. You have to work your way into that. I'd say after a year of having good credit, payments on time, all that good stuff, you can start getting into tier 3 and tier 4 cards and getting approved for them. Also, you want to avoid having too many secured cards and too many like student cards. If you're a student or if you're just somebody who's starting off, you only want to have like one student card or like one starter card, and that's it. Once you've had that one starter card for 6 months, start working your way up into like the tier 2 cards like the Freedom Flex and the Freedom Unlimited. The reason for that is because those tier 1 cards that you get are always going to be very, very low limits. Going over to Capital One, because Capital One is all MasterCards. If you were to get something like the Platinum MasterCard or the Secured MasterCard, that would be just a plain MasterCard. That would be considered like tier 1. If you move over to something like a Quicksilver, now Quicksilver is more of like a tier 2 card. It comes with cashback benefits, additional benefits, but it's still definitely tier 2 on the lower side. If you apply for something like their newer card, the Venture X is the highest tiered MasterCard that they have. And, if you apply for that, you can expect a high limit automatically. And I know some of you are thinking, oh, but these higher tiered cards, they have annual fees and I don't want to pay that. Well, think about it this way. You get the card, right? And the first year you hit the sign-up bonus. Let's use a Sapphire Preferred as an example, right? Sapphire Preferred right now, let's actually go. What is the bonus right now? Sapphire Preferred is giving you an 80,000 point sign-up bonus. So that's at least $800 in cash. And their annual fee is $95. But let's say you do get this card, right? After the first year of you having it, and let's say if you get the Sapphire Preferred, you're most likely to get a limit over $5,000 and above. If you don't want to keep it after the first year because you don't want to pay this annual fee, you can always downgrade this Sapphire Preferred to something like a Freedom Flex or a Freedom Unlimited. And the cool thing is when you're downgrading the card, you still get to keep that high limit, except it's just now going to be on a different card. Or if you were to get the Sapphire Reserve, right? This one has a heftier annual fee, $550. Same thing here. You get this card, you get the $10,000 limit, you pay the annual fee for the first year. If you don't want to pay it, you can just use the sign-up bonus points to basically pay off the annual fee. And then after year 1, you can downgrade from a Sapphire Reserve to something like Freedom Unlimited, Freedom Flex. And that Freedom Flex is now going to carry that $10,000 limit. Don't be afraid to get high tier cards just because of these annual fees or just because you don't travel or you don't need these benefits. You can always just get it. And then after 12 months of having it, product change or downgrade to another card, but you still get to keep that limit with you. Okay, so now let's talk about some credit limit increases that you guys can get literally right after watching this video. Now the following banks, these will increase your limits without a credit check, and you can do these every 3 to 6 months. So number 1 is the Apple Card. We have Citi, Capital One, Discover, Navy Federal, and American Express. Now when you guys are requesting these limit increases as a soft pull, so with no credit check, make sure that your credit is not frozen. Make sure that none of your credit bureaus are frozen because, like I said, they do need to soft pull. So they do need to still check your things. So like I mentioned in the intro, I went back to the entire course and I wanted to add 2 points to this list here. 2 banks that are not on here that should be are Chase and Bank of America. Both of these banks will also give you limit increases without checking your credit. Now, this wasn't the case back in 2022. This is the case now. So if you have cards with either of those 2 banks, you can apply these same strategies and you should be good. Let's break down the Apple Card real quick. This one's really, really easy to do. And I know a lot of people have the Apple Card because a lot of you probably have ran the play where you can get the Apple Card without getting a credit check. If you don't know how that works, I'm going to leave a link to that video down below. Yeah, it's on my YouTube. It's a free Apple Card. But essentially, you're just opening the wallet. You're going to click on the Apple Card. You're going to hit this little 3 dots on the right-hand corner. It's going to take you to this page here. You're going to click on Message, which is then going to take you to the text message page, where all you have to do, and this is going to take you like no more than 60 seconds, by the way. You're going to type in credit limit increase, give it about 15 to 20 seconds, and bam, they'll give you your limit increase as long as you meet all the requirements. The requirements we already talked about. Next, we have American Express, and the reason you see 3x hack here is because if you may or may not know, American Express, when they give you a limit increase, you can request up to 3 times your credit limit, which is awesome, right? So if you get approved for a $10,000 credit card, in your mind, you already know that that $10,000 credit card is going to be or can be a $30,000 credit card after 3 months of having the card, so after 90 days. Even though American Express usually states that you have to wait 90 days, I have seen several data points, and I have seen instances where people try before the 90 days to request a 3x limit increase or less. It doesn't have to be 3x, it can be 2x or 1.5x. But I've seen people do it before the 90-day period, and they have gotten approved for it. Your mileage may vary on that. It doesn't hurt to check, right? Because, again, you're not getting a credit check for this. So for this one, you're going to go to the American Express website, click on Account Services, and you're going to hit Request Credit Limit Increase. Now, just because you can request up to 3 times your credit limit, guys, I do not recommend you abuse this. So, for example, let's say you get a $15K credit card with Amex, and you request a 3 times credit limit increase. 15 times 3 is 45,000. If you request those 45,000, you're most likely going to get hit with an FR, which is a financial review, where they're going to be asking for proof of income, tax documentation. Now, if you're okay with that and the income that you put in your credit card application matches the income that you actually make, then a financial review is not a big deal. Your cards will just be frozen for a few days or a few weeks. You submit that information, they'll review it. They'll say, oh, okay, cool, this person makes this much. Yeah, we'll grant you the 45,000. And then you'll get all your accounts unfrozen and the financial review will come off. However, if in your credit card application you put more money than you actually make, I do not recommend going through a financial review. So if you do use this 3x credit hack with Amex, just keep this 35,000 in mind. If you were to get a $5,000 credit card right off the bat, after 90 days, you can request 5 times 3, 15,000. That's fair. That's under the $35,000 cap we were talking about. Next one we have is Navy Federal. This is probably one of my favorites because Navy Federal, you can do limit increases like every 91 days. And there's this midnight loophole where apparently if you, and I've tried this, I haven't had any results from it, but I've seen a lot of people get some really good hits from this, where if you request your limit increase after midnight, the limit increases are a lot higher. Now, when you're doing Navy Federal, do not call in for this. You have to do it online. If you do it online, it is going to be no credit check. If you call in, they're going to do a credit check. So just go online, log into your portal. You're going to click on your account and you're going to request increase my credit limit. Now, the reason I said I really like Navy is because they're very, very generous with their credit limits that they give you to start with, and they're also very generous with their increases. So I've seen people request anywhere from 25 to 100% of their current limits. Let's say you have a $10,000 credit card and you request a 20K limit. They may deny that 20K limit, but they may give you 15K instead, which is fine. Always shoot a little higher than what you actually want. I'm going to mention this again, but make sure that your cards are paid down. Make sure you're in good standing with the bank, and these limit increases are going to get instantly approved. So next we have Citi, and with Citi, this one's pretty straightforward. You just log into the account, go to services, request your limit increase. Now with Citi, you can't request the amount that you want, but as soon as you click the button, within like 10 to 15 seconds, they'll give you the limit increase based on what they want to give you, pretty much. Going into Capital One and Discover here, I didn't put any screenshots because these are all pretty straightforward, guys. The only complicated ones, not really complicated, but Amex and Navy Federal are probably the ones that kind of need a little bit more explanation, but everything else is just a matter of logging into your portal. I know with Capital One, you can put how much you want to request, and Capital One tends to be very, very stingy. I've had so many issues in the past with Capital One. If your card is maxed out or has high utilization, instant denial for the credit limit increase. If you haven't used your card in the past 90 days, instant denial on the credit limit increase. So make sure you guys are taking advantage of the spend and pay that I talked about in the previous video, especially with Capital One, or they're not going to give you anything. And then you have Discover. Discover's pretty chill. You request your limit increase, they'll give it to you. All right, guys, so let's get into the high limit lenders list here. And we're going to be talking about different banks, major banks, credit unions, smaller banks, and even individual cards. Now, before I move forward, you guys need to keep in mind that every year we have new credit cards, new banks, etc. So this list is probably going to change in the next 12 months. So every 6 to 12 months, I'm going to come back to this list. And this list is going to be in the description of the video. And I'm going to edit it. I'm going to take anything out that shouldn't be there. And I'm going to add anything new that I feel like is relevant at the time. So first, let's break down the obvious, the major banks. So major banks, we have Chase and Amex, the most obvious. Chase, very generous with limits all the time. Personal cards, especially business cards. You want to set up those relationships, especially with Chase, to guarantee those higher limits. American Express, we know the 3x credit hack. Even if you do get a low limit, you can increase that by 3x. We know that. Barclays, they don't have too many great cards, but when you do get their cards, limits are very, very, very good. Then we have Goldman Sachs. So Goldman Sachs owns Apple Card. Okay, for those who don't know, they also own the GM credit card and the GM business credit card. Now the cool thing about Goldman Sachs, and the reason I put this little note here, no credit check ×3, is because you can actually get all 3 of those credit cards without getting your credit check. You can get an Apple card, you can get a GM card, and you can get a GM business card. All 3, no credit check. If you want the full breakdown on that, this video right here explains everything. PNC, really good. You do need a relationship with them though, so don't bother applying for credit cards or any credit products if you don't have at least a checking account with them. And then you have Citibank. Citibank is probably, I put them towards the bottom of the list because it's a 50-50. Sometimes they're very, very generous with their limits and they'll give you something really nice. Sometimes they're going to be very stingy and they won't. But majority of the time, I've had a lot of success with Citi. So now getting into other banks and credit unions. First, we have Fidelity. Fidelity has a credit card. It's a 2% cashback card. And they actually give you some really high limits on that account. That card's been super popular for the past few years on handing out high limits. Then you have Navy Federal. This one's like the most obvious. Everyone knows that Navy Federal gives just insane credit. After Navy Federal, we have PenFed Credit Union. They're also really, really generous with their personal limits. And with that, I like to actually throw in PSECU as well, which is Pennsylvania's biggest credit union, and which is in the play that we basically broke down in the bonus section. As of right now, in Q2 of 2022, PSECU is actually handing out higher limits than Navy Federal and PenFed. So if you're watching this early on, I recommend taking advantage of PSECU. Just because right now their lending is crazy. It's crazy how back in 2022 with PSECU, you could easily get 2 $20,000 cards, a $30,000 auto loan, basically get approved over $50K in a single day with 1 credit check. And that's no longer the case. So that being said, PSECU is one of those banks that do still offer decent limits on their cards, but it's nothing crazy. I want to say that after 2022, when they started shutting down people's accounts and closing them out for no reason, they lost a lot of relevancy and are no longer really popular in the credit space. Next is KeyBank. A lot of people don't know about this one. Very good with high limits. Then we have First Tech Credit Union. This credit union has probably one of the few credit cards that you can get with a $100,000 limit. It's called the Odyssey card. Let me pull it up. This is it, First Tech Credit Union. You scroll down, it's the only black card that they have, this one here. The Odyssey Rewards World Elite MasterCard. Remember what I was telling you guys with the credit card tiers. This is just World MasterCard. This is just a regular MasterCard. But this Odyssey is a World Elite MasterCard, meaning it's a higher tier. You can see right here, up to $100,000 credit limit on this credit card. In order to get approved for this one, I believe they asked for 2 years of tax history. But don't be discouraged, because even if you don't get the 100K, I think the minimum that you get on this card is $25,000. So if you get approved for it, you're going to be getting at least $25K, which is still really, really good. I know First Tech, they pull Experian, so make sure your Experian credit report is really good. And if we just talk about First Tech, then we have Space Coast Credit Union, FNBO, First National Bank. They have some on the personal side and on the business side. FNBO tends to pull Experian, I believe, like most of the time. Alliant, I talked about this one earlier when I was giving you guys the examples of emerging credit limits. You need to open up a checking account with them, first of all. With a lot of the credit unions, guys, you'll notice that you need to open up a checking account with them first. Put some funds in that account and then go ahead and apply for the credit card. Next on the list, Citizens Bank. And then last on the list here, we have BB&T, which is now called Truist. It just in my head, I keep on thinking BB&T, but it's called Truist. They're a newer bank. They have a lot of credit card options, and most of them with some high limits. I just want to mention these cards that you see here, this slide, irrelevant. Some of these cards don't even exist anymore. But that's pretty much it, guys. That's everything that you need to know when it comes to high limits. We talked about everything. We went over the prerequisites, building those relationships, very, very important. Income that you should be using. We talked about spend and pay, spending a lot on your card, paying it all back several times a month. Talked about merging limits. We talked about credit card tiers. I just give you guys a list of all the banks that you can go hit. There's a lot. There's a lot of banks that you can go start building relationships with, start opening checking accounts with, start going to apply for these credit cards. Because like I said, once you get high limits, there's no going back. Once you get the high limits, from there on out, everything else is high limits. Look, just to wrap everything up, the name of the game is, if you're first starting off, get credit cards with the lenders that give you high limits. If you already have credit, start requesting increases on the cards that you currently have and open up new cards with some of those high limit lenders. Once you start breaking into the 5 to 10K limit credit cards and you move over to the business side, then you start getting approved for the $20,000, $30,000 business credit cards. Once on the personal side, you start getting the $10,000 to $20,000 limit credit cards, then on the business side, you start seeing the 30K, 40K, 50K cards. But that's pretty much the whole thing. Obviously, I had to break all those other things down so you can understand to this point, but that is my 60-second summary of this entire video. For those of you that watched to the end, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I hope you found this course valuable. To be honest, when I launched it back in 2022, I got hundreds, literally hundreds of messages of people with wins on getting, high limit cards, getting limit increases. And that's when I realized that I was really glad that I put this together back in the day. The whole goal of this thing was to help people with low limits get out of that. Especially for those of you that are business owners, the biggest issue that you run into is getting high limit approvals with some of these banks. And if you went over all the information that we just talked about in this video and you apply it, there should be no reason why you struggle to get access to high business limits. Now, if you're one of those people that value your time and value doing things the right way and you need help with getting business funding, I will leave a link down below in the description where you can set up a consultation with myself or one of my team members. When we jump on that call, let me know that you came from this video and I will hook you up with something. Trust me, it's something good. Also, if you're not in a Discord, join the Discord. It's great if you want to meet other people who are also basically taking advantage of credit, whether it's for funding, for travel, for whatever it is, cashback. Just if you join, please don't ask newbie questions. Use Google, use your resources. This is more of like a community chat to learn from each other and provide data points, provide information. So jump in there. We have over 1,000 people. I think it's a pretty cool community. I think you'll enjoy it. I appreciate your guys' time. If you have any questions, you know where to drop them. And subscribe to the channel because every now and then I'm gonna be dropping some pretty good videos on here.